Reading from the New World Translations, Colossians chapter 1, verse 15 states, He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. Verse 15 is a statement, and the next two verses are the reasons why the statement is true. So verses 16 and 17 tell us what the firstborn of all creation means in its proper context. Here's the issue. The Watchtower adds the word other 4 times to the text, which is not in the original, and completely changes the meaning of the text. The New World Translation, verses 16 and 17, read as such. Because by means of him all other things were created in the heavens and upon the earth, the things visible and the things invisible, no matter whether they are thrones or lordships or governments or authorities. All other things have been created through him and for him. Also, he is before all other things, and by means of him all other things were made to exist. The New World Translation states that what's in the brackets, which would be the word other, was not in the original text, but it's there to clarify the text. Kind of like having a brand new car, and you thought for 3 years everything was covered. And then after you have a problem with your engine, the car salesman says, yeah, all other things are covered, just not the engine. Now, remember that the New World Translation arrived until 1950. So here's my first question. Before the New World Translation was in print, how did a Jehovah's Witness explain how a created being can create all things if he himself was created? The King James translates it. For by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, or all things were created by him and for him, and he is before all things, and by him all things consist. That this text is proof that Jesus is God, for only God can create all things, be before all things, and hold all things together. But second, what is the meaning of firstborn in these passages? Well, according to the definition of firstborn, it was a male that was the first to open the womb. So by definition, if the firstborn only meant this, then Jehovah would need a created being with a womb before the world began in order for the first created being to open that womb. The problem is there would need to be another created being first that had a womb in order for the first created being to open it, which is simply impossible. So what in the world could the Apostle Paul mean by firstborn of all creation? Since all other translations, pun intended, say that Jesus created all things and he is before all things, then does the firstborn have any other possible meaning according to the scriptures? Most of the time, the firstborn son was treated with a double or an additional portion of inheritance than his brothers. But have you considered David was the youngest of 8 in the household of Jesse? See 1 Samuel 16 verses 6 through 13. He was also the second king of Israel. Yet the book of Psalms states in Psalms 89 verses 20 through 27. In verse 20, it says, I have found David my servant, with my holy oil have I anointed him. But going down to verse 27, still speaking of David, also I will make him my firstborn higher than the kings of the earth. Thus, King David would be the firstborn over all the kings of the earth. Thus, the firstborn can refer to a person's position that is established by God. So since it would be impossible for Jesus to be the firstborn of all creation as far as a creative order, for how can he be first to open a womb and still be the first created being at the same time? Then the Apostle Paul must be referring to the position as king over all creation. That makes sense, for he is in a position of being firstborn over or king over all creation, and verses 16 and 17 state that very carefully. But notice what the Gospel of John says, chapter 1, verses 2 and 3. from the New World Translation, this one was in the beginning with God. Did God have a beginning? If he did, then he could not be God. If God had no beginning and Jesus was there, then Jesus would have no beginning, and thus he would have to be God. Verse 3, all things came into existence through him. Notice what the last part of the verse states. And apart from him, not even one thing came into existence. So, if not even one thing came into existence apart from Jesus, then how can Jesus bring himself into existence, since verses 2 and 3 are clearly speaking of him?